for Chevrolet.
It was one of the most brilliant marketing schemes ever devised.
There goes that venture in a car.
GM convinced the average American that with each new year, you need a new car.
A tribute to his good taste and position. A motor car designed for today.
It was the perfect sales pitch for a prosperous country, raring to try out a brand new highway system.
See the USA in your Chevrolet.
And they could offer a car for every purse and purpose. Because from the beginning, GM was really several car companies in one.
Instead of just the Model T, one size fits all, well, GM came along with this hierarchy of brands, so you could start out life with a practical and modest Chevrolet, and then you'd get to be, a prestigious Cadillac at the end, essentially. And in between, maybe you'd go through a Pontiac, an Olds, and a Buick.
Creating each line was a marriage of brains and brawn.
Today, the car stylist reaches for maximum design appeal.
Designers like Harley Earl, the Da Vinci of Detroit, would come up with glorious moving sculptures. Engineers would add their mathematical horsepower. And immigrants with little or no education took on the back-breaking, mind-numbing task of building them.
In the 20s and 30s, these were horrible jobs to have. There was a caste system, and yet you could pretty much get hired if you could show up and you had the might to do those jobs.
Out of this sweat and noise, through the Depression and the Second World War, rose the United Auto Workers. The union proved its might through sit-down strikes and world-beating productivity. By 1950, GM could easily afford to give them pensions and health care. And as a result, employer-based coverage became the American way, and a UAW card became a ticket to middle-class security.
You didn't need an education to hold these jobs. They would hire you without a high school diploma.
People could live their lives, educate their children, send their children to college. They could look forward to a retirement with a pension and medical benefits.
And through the 50s and 60s, life in Motown was good. But with higher GM profits came higher union demands. And in 1970, after a 2-month strike, they were given a sweet deal known as 30 and out. If you started on the line at 18, you could retire at 48 with full benefits for life.
Part of the thinking that went into that from the GM standpoint is, look, we know it's a rich agreement, but we can afford it.
But the deal only shortened the fuse on a ticking bomb. Because as the workforce aged, GM would have to spend more on retirees and less on cars.
If there wasn't any leadership on the union side, they had to get reelected. There wasn't any leadership on the company side, they couldn't afford a strike.
The 70s also brought oil shocks and new regulations. GM frantically tried to re-engineer a more efficient fleet while cutting costs by building various brands from Chevy to Caddy the same way.
There's Caprice and 72 Impala. The new Monte Carlo is...
And that was really a fatal error. People noticed, well, all GM cars look alike. Well, they are alike. Why would I pay premium money for a car that's actually this other car?
And because smaller cars mean smaller profit, executives cracked the whip on labor, demanding more, faster.
They go from 60 cars an hour, not to 65, not to 70, they go to 100 cars an hour. It's really pretty amazing. I mean, and the result, quality nosedived.
Then you get to the end of the assembly line, and at that time they had 2 doors. And door number 1 said major repair, and door number 2 said minor repair. And when you got to these rooms, you discovered that every car they had made that day was either in major repair or minor repair.
Here's one piece of that era's fruit, the 1977 Chevy Vega. This thing dripped so much oil, my dad referred to our driveway as the Black Sea. But this was only one of GM's problems during the 80s. The others came from Japan and had funny names like Honda, Nissan, and Toyota.
They called them Econo boxes. And when you're General Motors and you're building big Buicks and Cadillacs with V8 engines, I mean, they just look down their noses at these little cars.
The people of Kentucky...
But the Japanese were smart. They knew politicians would block an import invasion, so they built plants here, in the American South, where there was no history of car building, no preconceived notions, no union. Just job-hungry workers willing to try the Japanese way.
Rather than having long assembly lines where people did their thing and didn't care what the quality was and just kept passing it down the line, They had teams of people. These people cared about the quality. They're competing against other teams. They're evaluated. They're rewarded on the basis of the quality of what they do.
The assembly lines at Toyota had something Americans never imagined: a cord that would stop the line until a problem was fixed, shifting quality control to every worker.
I think seeing over 3,000, 4,000 cord pulls in an 8-hour shift is not uncommon.
It is the heart of the Japanese philosophy known as Kaizen. It means constant improvement.
It really was using the brains as well as the bodies of the employees.
And as Kaizen gave rise to more reliable cars, the Japanese captured a new kind of consumer.
The working woman who'd never been schooled in cars, whose priority was reliability and safety, she'd look at that and say, thank you, Lord, this is exactly what I need.
The baby boomer generation, some 77 million, became convinced that it was stupid to buy an American car. The baby boom generation handed down those attitudes to their children.
Through the 90s, GM made some feeble attempts at reinvention with the Saturn and the electric car. But both were allowed to wither as a loophole in pollution laws gave rise to the SUV. Americans seemed to want bigger cars again, and GM could make a bigger profit turning them out, especially since they'd seen the light and adopted the Japanese style. The last few years, many GM workers were reinvigorated by new plants and a new sense of teamwork.
But what I don't think that a lot of people realize is the quality concepts that we have adopted, the teamwork, the union management working as a team, not this fight, fight, fight.
Designers rather than accountants led the company's vision once again, and they actually started to turn a profit overseas. Especially in China, where the new rich love the Buick. It is comfortable and safe to ride, she says. Its quality is excellent. But the positive trends were too little, too late. Last summer, gas prices rose, killing the SUV and truck business. And when the economy collapsed in the fall, people stopped buying cars altogether. It was too much for a sick behemoth, tens of billions in debt. And what happened next, no one ever imagined.